Both are in key swing states in the United States in that presidential race. And it could be a difference maker in what continues to be a neck-and-neck race, according to most polls. But do the polls tell the whole story? And what are people watching for in this final weekend before Election Day on Tuesday? Let's bring back the front bench. Sabrina Grover, Jordan Paquette, Gurdatin Singh, and Marie Vastel. Sabrina, what does it tell you that these polls are so close to Election Day as well?
You know, I think that it shows that Donald Trump's voter base is very motivated. And I think that that hasn't changed, even though Kamala has had such strong endorsements from Republicans that have come out in support of her. You know, so many people who I think previously could have been considered Trump supporters back in 2016, even in 2020, now on her side. That voter base is not chipping. And what hasn't happened is Kamala's voter base hasn't increased enough. So even the switch from Joe Biden to Donald Trump, like, it was 50-50 pretty much throughout that entire period as well. And I don't know that she's been able to grow enough, or at least that's not showing up in the polls.
Yeah, and Jordan, I think like sports and teams going into the playoffs, it's all about peaking at the right time. And to Sabrina's point, you haven't really seen Kamala Harris's vote, or at least the polls, really continue to climb. How key is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, they're neck and neck right now. She had that momentum in the summer going into, I think, when she was first announced as nominee. But then heading through convention, obviously got a huge bump after that. Going into the fall, it was able to maintain it. But the last couple of weeks, there's been some stumbles. I think President Biden didn't do anybody any favors this week going out with that garbage comment, even though it was taken out of context. But hey, it's going to be a very, very close night on Tuesday. I don't think we'll have the result on Tuesday unless it's very, very early in the morning when all of us will be up watching. But no, it's going to be a tight race. I think it'll take quite a long time to decide.
Not that anybody's really surprised, Marie, but it got very, very personal and continues to be personal. One has to look no further than the comments about Liz Cheney. Are you at all shocked that it's continued to be personal and that it's not as much on the politics?
Are you? No, I'm not at all. I mean, this is Donald Trump. It's who he is. And the other side, too. I'm not saying it's just him. But it's what American politics have become in the past years. It's become incredibly polarized. It's become incredibly personal. It's become incredibly aggressive. And I think it's just a preview of weeks or months to come. I think no matter what happens, and I agree probably not on Tuesday night, but in the coming days or in the following days, it's going to be a bit chaotic, to say the least. I mean, there are two scenarios. Either Donald Trump wins or Donald Trump refuses to lose. Either of those scenarios is going to be filled with a lot of aggressive sentiments, I will say. And I think it's going to create a lot of instability. And if I can just bring it back to here for a second, I think that's something that the Canadian government is certainly bracing for, because no matter who wins, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of trade and protectionism. NAFTA has to be, the new NAFTA has to be renegotiated either way. And if Trump wins, there's a lot of unpredictability on things like the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza and Lebanon, on NATO spending, like on migration. If he decides that he wants to announce, probably can't do it that easily, but if he decides that he wants to announce that he wants to deport a whole ton of people, I think it's not the greatest timing, given that, as we were saying before the break, that Mr. Trudeau probably wants to focus on his re-election, and now he might have to deal with a second can of worms in 8 years, I guess.
Yeah, conversely, Gurdatin, how do you think that might actually benefit Prime Minister Trudeau? Because sometimes drawing that comparison between himself and Trump could benefit him in terms of saying to voters in Canada, look, Donald Trump's in the White House. You need me here in Canada to safeguard some of the things that you hold dear here. How do you think that it will play in our politics here?
So I think undoubtedly it'll be something that'll be used by the Liberals to try to contrast themselves with the Conservatives. And I think it's pretty clear that the Conservatives have been trying to take a page out of the right-wing handbook from America, with the same kind of name-calling, the same kind of sensational speaking, the attack against not just policy, but also trying to deconstruct and fall into this kind of like cultural war, very American-style politics we see. But do I think it'll have an impact on Canadians? I'm a bit doubtful. I always like to remind folks that in Canada, we don't vote people in, we vote people out. And I think right now there's just so much dissatisfaction with the current Liberal administration that people are really voting to remove the current administration. And I think it's going to be a change government either way in the next election. So I don't know how much impact it'll have, but it probably will play as an election strategy.
Sabrina, what do you think? Do you think that inside the PMO they're looking at this and obviously they're thinking about any scenario, but is a scenario with Trump in the White House something that maybe actually benefits Prime Minister Trudeau?
Well, you know, on Sunday we roll the clock back, and on Tuesday the government of the United States might roll the women's rights and trans rights back to the 1900s as well. And so I think that that's probably what they're looking for in terms of how they maneuver this politically, right? You've seen a lot of that same rhetoric on abortion rights, on the rights of trans youth here in Canada come through conservative mouths, whether that's premiers or other conservative politicians. And I think that the federal government and the Liberals have been really poignant on attacking those and making sure that it's clear where they stand on that spectrum. So I think, like, from a political standpoint, that's what we're seeing. From a more policy standpoint, I think regardless of whether Kamala wins or Donald Trump wins, you're going to see a lot of issues come up that the Canadians are going to have to negotiate. With Donald Trump, it's completely unpredictable, and there's no adults left in the room for Donald Trump to even have in his corner people like Mike Pence, people that were in the administration before, and so it's really unpredictable how we'll be able to react to that. So I don't think that you can even be prepared, but certainly I think from both a policy standpoint and a political standpoint, there's a lot of unpredictability with Donald Trump, but there's also a lot of potential political narratives and storytelling.
Jordan, I'll let you finish on this one because a lot of, a couple of the panelists have talked about how the Conservatives have co-opted some of that. Do you think that there will be that sort of pour over of effect here on the Canadian side?
Well, I think the Prime Minister and the PMO is definitely hoping for some type of distraction to come up to avoid for some of the issues to come up here. Absolutely, that's certainly the case. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're going to be looking at two potential different governments in the U.S. that are both going to be pushing protectionist angles on these trade things. I mean, Kamala Harris is the same on CUSMA as Trump. She actually voted against the New Deal in the Senate. Yeah. So this is going to be a rough ride for Canada in either scenario. Sure, on one hand, we can maybe get back to some normalcy and be able to have a reasonable debates like reasonable people again without the extreme rhetoric. But at the same time, on a policy sense, it's going to be the same challenges on either side. So that's something that all parties are going to have to contest. I think the Liberals will go back to their same playbook, trying to attach conservatives to Republicans in the U.S. They've been doing that since the Bush days, but on the policy sense, I think it'll be ultimately the same.
And some polling suggests that actually Canadians think that Mr. Poilievre would be better equipped, or at least they think he would do better at dealing with Donald Trump. So I don't even know if that's a win for Mr. Trudeau.
Yeah, and we will see on Tuesday. We'll all be watching. Thanks to the front bench, Sabrina Grover, Jordan Paquette, Gurritan Singh, and Marie Vastel.